some of the smartest people I know are incredibly stupid. And some of the dumbest people that I know are incredibly successful by today's standards. They're happy, they're healthy, they're wealthy. So what's actually going on here? Why are smart, intelligent people who tend to overanalyze a lot of things not achieve the life they want? Because in this video, I'm trying to prove to you that thinking is one of the most important things that you can practice in today's world. Thinking is the one thing that determines the outcome of your life. And that's massive. The outcome of your life. That's literally everything. So if you learn how to think, which is what we're going to learn here, but we're not going to do it in a way where we talk about first principles thinking or systems thinking or metacognition or anything else that you can ask ChatGPT about, because that's why you're here. You're here for a unique take. Now, I've spent multiple years studying different thinkers, and I've spent a lot of time dissecting how they think and trying to integrate that into my own way of thinking. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to start very shallow and build our way up. We're going to start at one-dimensional thinking, then two-dimensional, then three-dimensional, then four-dimensional, and finally we're going to tap into the fifth dimension. So thinking tip number one, if you want to understand what something is, like thinking or genius thinking, it helps to understand the opposite, to understand what stupid thinking is. And when I say stupid thinking here, I'm not calling you stupid. I'm not calling you low IQ. I'm simply observing a pattern. Everyone thinks stupidly at times. Everyone thinks stupidly every single day. And that's what we're trying to avoid. That's what we're trying to move in the direction away from. I can't think right now. So if we observe people who display this characteristic of stupid thinking, we come away with a few insights. First is that stupid thinking is one-dimensional. People try to jam everything into their own perspective and have difficulty seeing outside of it. Second, stupid thinking is reductionistic. So experts in one domain, like business, try to reduce everything to a strategy problem as one example. Third, stupid thinking is tribal. So you only trust your group, your political party, your tribe, your religious people who adopt your same religious beliefs, and you consider everyone else wrong because they don't conform. And fourth, stupid thinking does not question. Your justification for most things is that's just how it's done. So as a whole, stupid thinking is about closing your mind off once you've reached the limits of what you know. Stupid thinking is when you stop thinking too early. You can still think within your own little bubble, but you never break out of that bubble. What tends to happen is you think for a bit, but then you reach a point where you're at your limits of how far you can think, and then you tend to collapse in on what you know. And then that's when you just become this person who just spews out pre-programmed thoughts or what they've been told or what other people believe is right. They don't push the boundaries of their own mind. So with that as an explanation of stupid thinking, we can start to grasp at what genius thinking could be. In this case, genius thinking, as a definition, would be the ability to hold threatening ideas in the realm of possibility paired with the intention to understand rather than just know. The mark of genius thinking is illustrated by the width, depth, and height at which you can think without being cut off from venturing further, often due to holding an idea as absolute. It's your ability to traverse the full universal web of ideas, reality, or all potential knowledge, and pull them together into something coherent or useful, if not something entirely new. But this also helps us see what this smart but dumb phenomenon is, where someone very smart in a domain like business will see someone who is depressed and just attribute that to being a productivity issue, or dude, you just need to sit down and do the work. You see this everywhere on social media. If you're depressed, just do the work. If you're sad, just do the work. And in some cases that helps, but it doesn't help in every case. It's like you're a little kid and you're trying to take the circle shape and you're trying to mash it into the square shape in the little board. And the same holds true for the other side, right? There's business person who's very practical, and then there's a spiritual person who's very abstract, and the spiritual person would attribute business failure to just not having the right vibration. And the thing here is that they're both not wrong. They're both correct in their own ways, but we have to understand how to apply those ways of thinking to different situations so that we can get the most out of it. Because wouldn't it help as a business person if you had a problem that you couldn't see because it's best solved through something spiritual to be able to tap into that lens so that you can actually solve the problem. So you've met these people, you've met these business people who just prescribe their way of doing things as the only way of doing things. You've met the hippies and the spiritual people who do the same thing, and you probably do the same thing without noticing it. And that's what I'm trying to get at here is if you just notice that, if you simply notice it, and don't allow your thinking to stop there, then you unlock this new power. So how do we actually start navigating out of stupid thinking? The first thing that will help here is just knowing the difference between knowing and understanding. Now, this isn't an explicit definition. I'm just trying to get you to understand here, which is kind of ironic, but knowing, we can think of that as horizontal development. It's domain expertise. You're accumulating facts, you're memorizing insights, you're studying the textbook, you know things. And understanding is vertical. It has more to do with the sophistication of your cognitive operating system. So you can know a lot and understand very little. You can also understand deeply and know relatively little. But if you understand more than you know, you can still act more effectively than the person who thinks they know everything. And that's exactly why smart people are stuck, is they read books, they collect knowledge, they develop themselves this way, but they can't see anything above that. They can't see into other domains. It's like they're installing new apps onto their operating system without upgrading the operating system itself, right? When you have an old iPhone and you download a new app, that app is probably going to be very slow. It's not going to work very well. A lot of the features are developed for the newer operating system. So when it comes to your own mind, you have to do the same. So a few more examples of the smart but dumb phenomenon is like, think of a businessman, very successful in business, but he still finds himself unhappy, right? He makes $100 million, then he sells the company, and now he's depressed. And he doesn't know how to solve that problem because he's not in business anymore, and that's all he knows. Or, and I'm sure many of you can relate with this, is a creative who has very beautiful work. They dedicated their lives to their craft, but when it comes time to make an income, they can't because they don't understand anything in the business domain or even in the psychological domain and how humans perceive value because they're not creating something that other people want. And that's not inherently a problem, but it can create problems because if you want to do that thing full time and you're working a job or you're trying to scrape by time to actually work on your creative craft, that's kind of a problem. You want to spend all of your time doing the creative thing, but you're not willing to learn what's going to allow you to do that because you think everything just boils down to, oh, I just want to be able to create art all day. Why can't I create art all day? And then another example is like a meathead who is very fit or goes to the gym, but their relationship is in shambles because they don't understand social dynamics. They haven't studied masculine feminine dynamics. They don't understand any of that. So they got buff for the sake of attracting a girl, but then they can't keep it and they don't know how to solve it because all they understand is, oh, if I get buff, girls like me. So that's why learning how to think is so important, because your mind is how you interact with reality. You process information, you make sense of it, which is thinking, you make a choice, then you receive information as feedback, so you have to think again, and you respond to that feedback and repeat the cycle. So you get information, you think, make a choice. You get information back from the choice, you think, you make another choice. You do the same thing. Think, information, choice, repeat, repeat, repeat. Thinking determines the outcome of your life. That's it. So every moment where you engage in stupid thinking creates a compounding effect. You dig yourself into this rut so deep that it becomes impossible to even see the thing that will get you out. So the more you double down on what you know as the one true way and you fail to learn, learning is kind of like an expansion pack for your thinking, right? So if you continue to learn, and I'm not talking about studying or memorizing facts, I'm talking about how to actually learn, which is by building projects, failing, getting feedback, repeating, iterating, doing it in the real world. That's how you make your life better. So let's break this down into an actual framework, and we're going to call this lines, levels, and altitudes, right? So first dimension, second dimension, third dimension of thinking, and we'll just move up the ladder. So we'll start with lines of thinking. So here's a graphic of how this will start to look. You can think of the width of this, the novice to advanced, as one line of thinking, right? You can think of this entire thing as you learning, let's say, marketing or astrophysics or politics or social dynamics or religion, literally learning anything. It's when you attempt to learn domain-specific knowledge. This graph applies to one domain, and you are increasing the width of that line of thinking. It's like you're gaining experience in a video game. Now, levels, on the other hand, how these are stacked is how you think about each line. And we've talked about how cognitive development evolves over time many times before. See Ken Wilber, see Susan Cook-Greuter, see Spiral Dynamics, so on and so forth. But we can extract those patterns and apply them to thinking itself about specific domains and multiple domains. So at level 0 of thinking, it's instinctual. So you're just born, right? When you're born, you just act out of pure survival. You react to stimulus without thinking at all. You don't even have the ability to think. And then level 1 is conformist. So this is black and white thinking. You follow rules and obey authority without questioning. You adopt others' perspective. So when you're born, you adopt your parents' perspective. You take on their religious beliefs. You take on what they think you should do for a career. And if they're born in the industrial age, that equals go to school, get a job, retire at 65. And then there's level 2, which is the individualist stage where critical thinking emerges and you construct your own model. So you build your own perspective. And for a lot of people, this is often based on their parents' perspective. They don't fully break out yet. They are still in this singular, one-dimensional way of thinking about the world. So you may not do exactly what your parents want you to do, but you're still on the default path that society set for you. So go to school, get a job, retire at 65, and you may be choosing your own major. You may want to get an art degree when your parents disagree with that, but they're still happy that you're going to college to get a degree. And then there's level 3, which I'm going to call synthesist. And this is where you see your model as one among many. You hold contradictions and use perspectives as tools rather than law or some unquestionable truth. Now, these aren't just things that I've made up. This is how minds evolve over time. This has been documented, and a lot of people don't reach that level 3. They either remain Bible thumpers, so to say, across multiple domains, not just religion, as level 1 thinkers, or they rebel against that and consider their own way of doing things as law. But when you're a synthesis, you start to break out of the single-minded perspective. You start to understand that, there is actually some form of truth in how other people do things, which is a crazy thought to many people. Who knew that everyone is right in one way or another? And then level 4, we're going to call this generative thinking. So you create original perspectives that didn't exist before, or you come to ideas without outside influence. So if we go back to the graph, you can see how level 1 starts to unlock level 2, and then level 3, and then level 4. It's not like you have to get 100% through level 1 in order to move up the ladder. You can be at level 1 completely, but you can tap into level 4 occasionally. But of course, we want to tap into that more. We want to maximize this so that we increase our surface area of thinking. Now, one important distinction here is that level 1 and level 2 can be considered first tier thinking if we group those together. What that means is that it's overly dogmatic, right? I'm right, you're wrong, or my group is right, your group is wrong. And then they fight against each other a lot. Then levels 3 and levels 4 can be considered second tier thinking. This is where you start to reject dogma and you start to actually seek truth for once, because your truth isn't the only truth. You understand that the ultimate truth lies somewhere in the middle. And usually you don't come to absolute truth. You come to trade-offs, right? Solutions don't really exist, but trade-offs do. That's Thomas Sowell. Now, one more thing here is that you can be at level 4, but in a particularly stressful situation, you can regress back down into lower levels. So you can regress down to level 1 and be very conformist in one domain of your life when you're stressed and you're going through it, or you're in an argument with someone and you're really not thinking. That's when you start to tap into the lower levels. So before we continue, I just want to make this exceedingly clear once again, is that genius level thinking is your ability to continue thinking. Because at each level of thinking, your ability to navigate that space to both known and unknown ideas continues to expand. When you're born, you don't really think. When you're a conformist or level 1, you think until you reach a point where you have the answer, then you start defending the answer. When you're an individualist or level 2, you do the same thing, but with your answer. And when you reach synthesist, you can think far and wide, but your ability to create new lines of thought is not fully developed yet. So reaching your highest ability to think, and thus providing the runway for your highest potential in this life, boils down to the simple practice of noticing when your mind feels threatened, being honest with yourself, and at minimum, staying open to new perspectives. That's thinking in a nutshell. That's how you think. You don't need any fancy first principles thinking to do that, even though first principles thinking holds some truth. Now, after lines and levels of thinking, there is your altitude of thinking, which is the average of how you think about each line or level. So if we look at a new graph, you can kind of see I've condensed the lines, I've added more domains, and now they're interconnected and you're at various different levels. And you may see something that you've seen before here, right? To best understand how this works and to almost complete the thinking puzzle, it helps to visualize thinking as a skill tree. So in a video game, you can put points into certain traits that allow you to do more inside the game. You can take on higher challenges, you can have more fun, and you can continue playing. The same holds true with the mind. But the thing is here, higher level traits can only be unlocked once you meet a specific requirement of lower level traits. So in a video game, you can't access something like level 3 dexterity when you haven't already put enough points into, let's say, level 3 strength. So many of you are interested in business, which is why I keep bringing this up as an example, but imagine a business person who takes it pretty far, right? You make a lot of money, but then you hit this plateau and you're like, man, I don't know what to do here. Like, I literally don't know. I've studied everything and I can't overcome this plateau. And you can't see the problem because you haven't developed other domains of your life. The problem here could be your inability to lead a team, right? Your emotional intelligence is so abysmally low that you don't even know that you're causing problems within the company that's causing it to stall. In order to be a true leader, you have to develop yourself in all domains of life. At least that's my belief. And even if there are people who make it very high without doing that, other domains of their life suffer as well. That's not something that I want, at least right now in my life. I want to, you have one life, maybe, I don't know, maybe AI changes that, but I want to do cool things in this life. I don't want to let problems sit around and fester and just make my life worse. This is also why domains like politics or religion or even things like nutrition online are so like violent and polarizing. It's a bunch of smart but dumb people just calling each other idiots because they can't see from each other's perspective. Okay, so now we need to tap into the fourth dimension. We covered lines, levels, and altitude, but now there's something more. Now, this isn't the fourth dimension of time. That's actually the fifth dimension that we're going to talk about. But this fourth dimension does increase your ability to think by the power of 4, because there are 4 dimensions of reality. And these dimensions are perspectives. They're ways of looking at the world in 4 different major ways. So when you're thinking about a belief or an idea or a situation or problem, you can kind of adjust the lens on your camera to see it in 4 different ways. So here's how this would look in graphic form. And you can see that it's divided into 4 quadrants because there is an inner world, which is mental, and then there's an outer world, which is physical. So by inner world, what I mean is psychological and cultural. There's your individual inner psychology, which contains your thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and consciousness. And then there's the collective inner world, or culture, which contains group beliefs, value systems, and ideologies. Then in the outer or physical world, you have your individual outer world, which is your visible appearance, behaviors, and physical brain states or other measurements. And then there's the collective outer world, which is composed of systems, structures, and social institutions. Now, why does this matter? It's because most people and most experts only look at one of them, only one quadrant. The neuroscientist only sees the brain states, while the mystic only sees the vibes, or the therapist who only sees the behavior, or the sociologist who only sees the social systems, or the philosopher who only sees the meaning, which is the culture. So genius thinking in this context is enhanced by your ability to see all of them. So as a little example and developmental progression here, let's say that I start learning about marketing. I get really good at marketing. And in order to do that, I have to study other people's methods, right? I'm within one line. I'm at level 1. I study Alex Hormozi or my own videos, and I think, oh, this is the one true way to do things. But then I grow. I become more mature. I'm in the space longer, and I advance to level 2. And I have my own way of doing things because I've experimented so much, which has helped me learn more. I become more of an expert because I'm not just copying what another person does. I'm doing things my own way, which gives me a competitive edge. And then if I have already pursued other interests in my life, or I continue pursuing interests in my life, like psychology and fitness and personal development, it gives me a deeper sense of pattern recognition. So not only can I understand the people that I'm working with more, or how the world works, or how culture works, and how I can apply my marketing to that thing, but it also further removes me from dogmatic thinking, which frees me up to think even more and become more creative. So from there, that's where things start to get interesting. But one thing I forgot to mention is that when you are thinking, you're usually thinking to solve a problem. That's what humans do. That's how we grow. That's what we find enjoyment in. That's where we find growth. That's where we find development. That's progress. And the minute you stop growing and thus stop thinking, problems start to multiply and life just becomes considerably worse. So if we identify a problem in today's world, like the world is becoming corrupt and meaningless, that gives us a starting point to think, right? And it also gives us an aim for our thinking. So to start thinking here, we can just question in the 4 perspectives or 4 dimensions like we talked about. So how does society control attention and market their ideas to the masses? That's the collective inner world. How can your behavior change more than it already has during this process to have a positive impact on society? What would be the steps to reaching such a point of influence with your marketing or other things that you can leave your mark? This is the individual outer world. What does the job market look like right now? Is a job an actual path to achieving such a thing? What about AI? Can I utilize the technology available to me to create that impact? This is the collective outer world, and it's all kind of merging together here. Am I thinking about this the right way, or is there more? What am I missing, and how does this make me feel? Does it make me feel motivated or inspired or hateful? That's the individual inner world. Now, we can go on with that, but I think you get the point. So now we get to talk about how to tap into the 5th dimension, because that was the 4th dimension, but we're going to start with a quote by Krishnamurti. It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. So think about that as we go through this section. In all previous examples, we never really tapped into the power of history. History is a very important thing, and it increases your ability to think that much more, because if you understand how things develop and evolve over time, you can predict, not entirely accurately, but in a more accurate way, how to go into the future, especially with your own actions, so you can set yourself up for some kind of success. But we're not trying to know here. We're trying to understand. We're not trying to memorize facts about certain events in history. We're trying to understand the general patterns that unfold, because that's going to allow us to understand anything that falls within those to some extent. So there are 5 things you can know here just to think about history better. And we're going to just run through these because I want to leave you to thinking on your own. The first thing is that the master pattern is transcend and include. So if you take a materialist, he would say that reality is composed of atoms. If you take a mentalist, then he would say that reality is composed of qualia. But if we zoom out for the sake of understanding, we understand that they're both correct because they're in separate perspectives. So if we look at what's actually happening throughout history, we can understand that reality is composed on a very general and metaphorical level of whole parts. What that means is that it's composed of wholes, but those wholes are also parts. As some examples, matter evolves into life, evolves into mind. Each of those are a whole. And so like matter is a part of life, but it's also a whole in itself. Then you can think of word to sentence to paragraph to chapter to book to library to wherever you want to go. Then you have machine to computer to artificial intelligence to whatever comes after that. Or you have human to house to city to state to country to continent to planet to solar system to galaxy, so on and so forth. This is why everything is connected in the way that people talk about, is because when you observe reality from a broad enough level, you see exactly this. So with each evolution of something, when something new emerges, it transcends and includes the thing before it. What that means, the important thing there is that if you transcend and you don't include, then something's wrong. And if you remove one of the parts from the whole that allowed that thing to exist, then the whole self-destructs. So this is why environmentalists are so concerned with climate change, is because if the biosphere goes to crap, then humanity goes down with it. But then you look at it from a technologist point of view and they're like, well, we don't really care about the environment right now because we're eventually going to create the technology that allows us to make the biosphere better, and it will survive that way. So they're thinking in terms of acceleration and progress, while the environmentalists are thinking of not necessarily regression, but doing things differently right now so that we can slow down the use of the resources that would make the biosphere bad. Now, this will make more sense with examples. So the second thing you need to know is just how individuals evolve physically, right? So we need to cover how individuals evolve physically and mentally, then how collectives evolve physically and mentally. Humans specifically tend to evolve or develop through an increasing circle of care or concern. So it goes from egocentric to ethnocentric to world-centric to cosmocentric, or reality itself. What that means is that you're born and you kind of start out selfish, and then you identify with your tribe or your group, and then you identify with humanity as a whole or the world, and then so on and so forth. But the thing here is that people try to skip levels. They don't understand, transcend, and include. They try to identify as this world-centric person who just cares about everyone's equality, but they don't understand that you also have to care about your group and yourself, because those heavily impact how much you can care about the world. It's like you can't, what's the quote where you can't fill someone's glass from if your own is empty. So this has to be accounted for in your thinking, because these people who identify as these world-centric virtuous people are smart but dumb. You do not sacrifice your own values or your group values for the sake of these world values that sound so noble when it doesn't work without the latter. I mean the former, sorry. Now, I can't remember if I prefaced that as individuals evolving physically or mentally, but that was obviously mentally, right? Your circle of concern. Physically, it's pretty obvious. You go from atom to cell to molecule to organism, and you can like see and feel and taste and touch the physical world. You understand how this happens. Now, in terms of how societies evolve physically and mentally, they're both deeply intertwined, because the tools allow for the worldview or the value system to emerge. Now, physically in societies, we see that people evolved from tribes to villages to empires to nation states. And the technology here was first hunting and gathering with simple tools, and then digging sticks and hoes, which enabled some food surplus. And then we invented the horse-drawn plow, which led to even more of a food surplus that allowed people to discover and explore and conquer. This is close to the Enlightenment and why that happened. But then we invented machines and computers, and we abstracted ourselves further away from both human labor and animal labor. So the evolution of societies physically allowed for them to evolve mentally as well. And this happens in a similar way as it does in individuals, where it's egocentric, ethnocentric, world-centric. But when we are talking about societies or collectives, it helps to use different terminology. So we can use something like pre-modern, modern to postmodern, or pre-rational to rational to post-rational, and then trans-rational. But what that means is that in earlier societies, we first conformed to authority, right? All we believed was that there were rain gods in the sky, and if it rained, we made them happy. And then we discovered science and reason, and we started to value progress. And now we're in this postmodern world where we kind of deconstruct everything, and we think everything should be equal when it doesn't work that way. And so we need to transcend and include the good parts. So if we ground this and make this practical and how to actually think about it, think of where we are right now in the age of intelligence. If you are still operating on industrial age technology as a business, or you think that the right path to go down is go to school, get a job, retire at 65 because that's what you would do in the industrial age, you're running on this outdated software and you need to change it. So if we want to make this practical, we want to ground it, we can think of the situation we're currently in where AI is on our doorstep and no one knows what to do next, right? That's the biggest problem. But if we look back at history, we can at least tell whether what we're doing is good or not, or is going to be beneficial for the future. So if you're still running on industrial technology as a business, then that's probably not a smart thing to do. If you aren't integrating AI in some way, transcending and including, then you're probably falling behind. And if you as an individual still have the default plan of the industrial age to go to school, get a job, retire at 65, when jobs are at threat of automation and you can't think creatively as to what you can do, or you can't predict, at least somewhat accurately, what a good path to go down is, that's how this is practical. That's what I talk about in like all of my videos. Now, everything I say obviously isn't going to be correct, but I do think it's heading in the right direction. I'm open to being wrong, but I'm also putting out there, I'm not just telling people to sit around and just be bulldozed over. Now, another practical way to think about this is when you're engaging in debate with another person or on social media, you can start to identify where they lie and what type of thinking they're using. So if you're on social media and someone's just being super polarizing or dogmatic or whatever it may be, you can assume that they're thinking stupidly and they're just trying to defend their own beliefs. Or if they sound like a TV or social media itself or the news, you can assume that they're just regurgitating this pre-programmed line of thought. They're not thinking at all. Now, the most useful thing here is to just identify where you are at, where your own center of gravity is, so that you can identify your own blind spots and see past them. You don't need to compete with someone else on how well you can think. You simply need to think better. So we've covered a lot of frameworks. We've tapped into this fifth dimensional thinking, but we missed something pretty important here. We missed the main thing, because stupid thinking is just when you stop thinking. But what makes a person stop thinking? What makes them turn in on themselves and to just start defending themselves endlessly? The answer here is identity, and you latching on to beliefs, ideas, or constructs and just making them a part of who you are, because that's inherently limiting, especially if those ideas, beliefs, or constructs are small, right? Your ability to think is determined by your world model. It's determined by your beliefs. So you should, in my opinion, adopt the most encompassing world model that you can. If you willingly adopt something going into it knowing that it's dogmatic, that it's ideological, that it's very one-dimensional, then your thinking is going to take the shape of that. Think of the diehard Republicans or Democrats, right? If you become one of the diehards, then you can't think out of that little bubble. Therefore, you will never be able to find the truth of the situation. You're just going to be arguing in circles and going nowhere. I don't know how more people don't see that or realize it. That doesn't mean that you can't adopt the values of either side or think that certain sides hold certain truths. It doesn't mean that you have to turn against both of them. That's not how this works either. It simply means that you don't need to feel threatened when someone else disagrees with you, because that threat is signaling that you think that's who you are. Now, this isn't only in politics. This is literally every single domain, even something as small as marketing, like we talked about earlier. You wouldn't know the amount of times that I've seen people on the internet talk about, let's say, Alex Hormozi's methods, and then someone disagrees with them and says that there can be a better way, and then they just argue endlessly. It's like, how can you not see that? It applies to religion. It applies to vocation. It applies to everything. So a helpful thing here, and another thing to think about, is how you came about getting these beliefs. Because most people in today's world haven't thought an original thought a single day in their life. You were born into a specific part of the world. That specific part of the world is called a culture. That culture practically holds its own value system and belief system. If your parents were raised in that culture and you were raised by your parents, those were probably imposed on you. And since you weren't able to think for yourself, you adopted them for the sake of survival, because you have to survive or else you'll be kicked out of the house or something worse. I mean, even in another part of the world with a different value system, you could literally get killed, and you don't want that. So you conform. You start at level 1. And so those beliefs limit how far you can think from the get-go. And most people don't ever question that. They never break out of that bubble. That is the greatest trap you can fall into, because you have to remember your mind is how you interact with reality. Remember, you see information, you interpret it or make sense of it at your current level, line, altitude of thinking, and then you make a choice. And then you do that again and again and again, and then it crystallizes, it becomes conditioned, it becomes repetitive, robotic, and it determines the outcome of your life. That's insane. So you have to increase the space. You have to expand how many perspectives you can hold. You have to be able to navigate multiple different scenarios. If you only think within the confines set by your parents, teachers, employers, and peers on social media, the outcome of your life isn't going to be pretty. Just observe where the average person ends up, and it's not hard to see that. So the next time you feel questioned, I beg of you, this is the only thing you have to do, is just pause, look at it, observe how you feel, and do not collapse in on yourself. Just allow it to sit there, right? That's not even a thing. You don't even have to come to a solution. You don't have to come to any of that. You just stop the stopping of the thinking. Just don't respond. Just let it pass by and see where that takes you. So those who practice that will win. If you like this video, like the video, subscribe. And while you're here, feel free to sign up for the waitlist of Eden, which is the drive that handles your busy work. It's a new kind of drive because frankly, Google Drive and Dropbox have been dropping the box and they're really not that good. And it also has a projects feature, an agent inside of it, so it can edit all your files. You can do your creative work in there if you're a creator who uploads videos. And this is a cloud drive. So imagine having it in your Finder on your computer, but those never actually download to your computer. So you can quite literally throw away your hard drive. but you can search for and drag the right thing into, say, Premiere or whatever you're editing in, and then you can make edits there and it's saved in the drive. You don't need an external hard drive anymore. That's how cool Eden is. Sign up for the waitlist. It'll be released at some point. With that said, like, subscribe. Glad to have you here. Subscribe to my Substack if you want more content like this, and I'll see you in the next video.